In this parsha, we have the last three makis, the last of the 10, last three makis. And then, of course, we have the final makir, the makis Bechoros, which ended the whole thing. And then Paroi urged the Eden to leave Mitzrayim. Throughout the process of the makis, there were many times, even in the early makis, in the previous Seder, where Paroi, during the time of the makir, he called Moshe and he says, I'll let you go, just get the makir off my back. I'll let you go. And then he would change his mind. And in this parsha, likewise, each one of the makis, Paroi called Moshe and said, I'll let you go, get the makir off my back. And then, of course, Moshe turned the makir off, and Paroi changes his mind. Makis Bechoros is different. Makis Bechoros, Paroi, after the makir was already finished, because Makis Bechoros is one moment. All the Bechoros were killed. And Paroi ran out and told Moshe, get out of my land. Something very unique happened in this Makis Bechoros. It is true that Makis Bechoros, one could say, is perhaps the most severe of the makis. But it's hard to say that the whole difference is on the severity of the makis, because the other makis was pretty hard. You had makis of wild beasts running the streets and attacking people. Can you imagine lions and tigers and snakes and scorpions running around the street, in your houses, all over the place? It's unlivable, it's untenable. And yet, he didn't convince Paroi to let Eden go. And then there was hail coming down, banging away and breaking the trees, breaking the houses. And that didn't convince Paroi to let Eden go. So it's not, it cannot be, so to speak, that the whole difference is in the severity of the makir, that is intolerable. And then particularly, that here the makir was finished already. When Paroi came calling Moshe, in the other makis he called Moshe while it was happening. Here he was already finished. So he knows that's it, this is the end of the makir. And now he comes, calls Moshe and tells him he should go. There must be something else, something unique in the message, in what the makir represented, that convinced Paroi, that told Paroi, okay, this is it, I'm giving up, you have to go. Paroi, originally, when Moshe came to Paroi and told him about Hashem, and told him about the Jewish people, how they are special by Hashem, and that you should let Eden go, Paroi said, I don't know what you're talking about. I don't know of Hashem, and I'm letting Eden go. So throughout the entire series of the makis, Moshe Rabbeinu was constantly telling Paroi, I am going to teach you about Hashem. With the following, this way, you're going to know about Hashem. As we spoke last week, that there were 3 sets of Makis. You remember that? 3 sets. Each one of the 3 sets had to establish Hashem's presence in the world with greater depth, with greater reality. First 3 was just to prove to Pare that there is Hashem. Second 3 is that Hashem is present in the world. And the third 3 is that the third group was to tell Pare that Hashem can do anything in the world. He's unlimited. So all the Makis were to counter Pare's original statement. I don't know of Hashem and I'm not going to listen to him. And yet, and the Makis really proved the point, because everything that Moshe Rabbeinu said came through exactly as he said it. The Rambam says that how do we know a Novi, whether it's a true Novi? A Novi, whether he is a true Novi, means he speaks in the name of Hashem. Actually, it's based on the posuk in the Torah. There are different ways to predict the future. There are many people that had different ways to predict the future. There's one very specific, very clear difference between all and a Novi. All can predict the future, if those who can predict the future. They can predict the future in approximation, about, around, something like. To be precise and say, this is exactly what's going to happen at this and this time, that is only a Novi Hashem. And if a Novi, he has a prediction, and it does not follow through exactly as he said, then you know he's not a Novi Hashem. Moshe Rabbeinu, when Pare told him by the Tzfardim last week, by the frogs, Pare said to him, get the frogs off my back, I'll let you go. The frogs were only the second makkah. Already Pare, he said, get them off and I'll let you go. Moshe said to him, I want you to tell me exactly when you want me to come off. And see if I'm going to follow through exactly on what you requested. And Pare named the time. And Moshe said, okay. And that's exactly what happened. In other words, Moshe proved to him clearly that he is speaking in the name of Hashem. There's no way of being interpreting it differently. And yet, even after that episode, the frogs, the next makkah after the frogs was the kinim, the lice. So at that time, Pare should have been convinced already that it's Hashem who is doing it. Moshe proved it to him. And yet, Pare still called his Khartoumim, called his sorcerers, and asked them to duplicate. And then the sorcerer said, we can't. And Kinim said, we cannot do it. It's not working for us. This is God's hand. The point which I'm making, in other words, that even after all that precise proof, Pare remained unconvinced. He could still he can still reinterpret, get out of believing and accepting and recognizing that Hashem is the one who's doing it and that there is Hashem. And it is precisely because of this aspect in the Makkah that he saw Hashem through his activity, through his Makkahs. But he didn't see Hashem directly. He saw what Hashem is able to do. He saw Hashem's koyach. He saw Hashem's fulfilling exactly what he says. But it is still, in a certain sense, it's still indirect. It is through a process, through a proof. Because he did this, that proves that Hashem did it. That did not have the power to force Pare and say, I admit and I'm letting you off. This we could see is what was happening the entire process of the 10 Makkahs. No matter what proof, how clear it was proven, it was only proven, it wasn't shown. He didn't see Hashem, he only saw what Hashem is able to do. And this is where Makkah's B'choros is different. Makkah's B'choros, as the Gemara says, and we say it in the Haggadah every Pesach, and it says in the Chumash, but the Haggadah makes the point, emphasizes the words that Makkah's B'choros was executed not through any second level, not through any messenger, through any malach or a sorov or a shliach. It was HaKadosh Baruch Hu b'chveido v'yatzmai. It was Hashem's presence itself that revealed itself, that made itself present and revealed in Mitzrayim, and as a result of that, this is Makkah's B'choros took place. It was Hashem's own hand, so to speak. Makkah's B'choros showed Hashem's presence directly, not through some kind of an act, but directly. And this is what forced Pare to recognize. He couldn't deny it anymore. He saw Hashem. He saw Hashem's hand. And this is what I want to discuss a little bit more. Where do we see in Makkah's B'choros this phenomenon? It is true, the Pasuk says, Ve'avarti be'eretz Mitzrayim b'laylo hazeh. Hashem said, I will pass through Mitzrayim this night. V'kesi kol b'cher be'et Mitzrayim, and I'll kill all the b'cheres, so forth. That we know because Hashem said so. But how was it that Pare was able to recognize it? So there are several aspects that are associated with this Makkah B'choros that point to this principle. First, in the general inyan, the Makkah's B'choros, where the firstborn were killed. So the question is, what's firstborn? What does it mean, the firstborn? Why the firstborn? What did they represent? What's so significant about it? That the firstborn were killed. If Hashem would have killed in one swoop the same number of people, but they're not B'chorim, but being just as tragic for Mitzrayim, just as scary, just as severe. What's significant in fact that they were B'choros? So the explanation for that is, the Bechoir has a very special koyach. He represents a very special quality that all the others do not have. The Bechoir, in simple terms, the Bechoir of a family is the firstborn, and therefore he is the beginning, he is the one who builds the entire next generation. He's the beginning of that. He is the strong, the strong pillar that builds the next generation in the family. The Bechoir also represents the first strength of the parents, that this is the Bechoir. Yankee Avinu said to Reuven, Bechoir Yater, Reuven, you're my Bechoir, and because you're my Bechoir, you should have had the greatest gift that can given to my children should have been yours. I'm sure you learned this. I can say that Reuven really should have been the Kohen, and Reuven should have been the Melech. Except because of some mistake that Reuven made, that's why it was taken away from him. The Bechoir gets the greatest input, the greatest spirit from his parents is invested in the Bechoir. And the halacha is, that you're supposed to honor your parents, and along with that, you're also supposed to honor the Bechoir. We learn that from the Torah. Because the Bechoir represents the parents more than any other child.
From another brother?
Yeah.
From parents?
No, other brothers.
Do you have a sister that's older than the brother?
What?
There's a girl that's older than the boy. She's the firstborn. Is that kid still considered the firstborn of?
Well, the din of Bechoir per se, you're supposed to honor the older in general, but the din of Bechoir per se applies to the firstborn boy. The Bechoir takes, that in the Torah there is the din of inheritance, that children inherit from their parents, their possession, their wealth, and the Bechoir takes a double portion. That's what the Torah says. Pishnai, Bechoir takes a double portion from all other children. In other words, the Bechoir stands for, and he has the power. The essential power of the family is vested first in the Bechoir. Similarly, when you talk about Mitzrayim, so the Bechoir in Mitzrayim, let me step back a little bit. In Avodas Hashem, the Bechoirim, originally, the Bechoirim were the Kohanim. To bring Korbanos was done by the Bechoiris. This is why Yankee was so anxious to take the Bechoir away from Esau. Because he said, how can Esau be allowed to do the Avodah, to bring Korbanos? Later on, you will learn that before Matan Torah, Moshe Rabbeinu brought Korbanos, and it says, Vayishlach es Na'arei b'nei Yisrael, he sent the Na'arim, the Ne'orim. Rashi says, who are these Na'arei b'nei Yisrael, who are the Ne'orim? The Bechoros. Up until after, when the Leviim were chosen, this was much later, the Bechorim, they were the one who represented the Aveda, because the Bechorim represent, even among the Jewish people, the greatest power of what the Jewish people stood for. They were ready to do the Aveda. In English. And therefore, B'choyle Mitzrayim, man means not just the firstborn, but it means the power pillar of Mitzrayim. Mitzrayim, you know, was a country, was a people that were morally depraved, were oivdei avodah zarah, and their strength consisted in this depravity, in this tumah. The Bechorim, they represented that tumah into the greatest degree. They represented the power of Mitzrayim, the avodah zarah of Mitzrayim, more strongly than any other part of the population. So now, okay, so we have that point of Bechoros. How did Malchus Bechoros take place? Malchus Bechoros, it says, Hashem says, "Ve'avarti be'eretz Mitzrayim alayla hazeh." Ve'avarti, I will pass through Mitzrayim, which means that Hashem will reveal His presence in Mitzrayim. Hashem reveals His presence. That's revealing the highest power of Kedusha possible. Hashem, His own presence. This power of Kedusha has a direct clash, opposition with the entire power of Tumah. And therefore, when this power of Kedusha reveals itself, the most significant power of the tumah gets destroyed, melts away. This is why the Mechorim were smitten. It wasn't just choosing arbitrarily a certain part of the population, because the Mechorim represented the epitome, the deepest klipa of Mitzrayim, the biggest strength of Mitzrayim. When Hashem revealed Himself, then this is what was affected. The biggest strength that their tumor was disintegrated. So this is one point that we see, that the whole union of Malchus Bechoros is not just that Hashem did a makeh. He brought hail, He brought orev, or whatever it is. Hashem revealed His own presence. And the effect of His presence reflected itself on Mitzrayim. And it reflected itself in the fact that Bechorim had died. That showed Pare clearly, as a first thing, that this is Hashem's presence. This is not just a makeh. The other makehs were a makeh. Hashem did this, Hashem did that. As I said before, it proved Hashem's ability. And it proves that Hashem can do it. But it didn't show him firsthand to see Hashem's presence. This makeh is a direct reflection of Hashem's presence. And this completely moved Pare. He had to, it's not a question of admitting, he saw it. He saw that the effect of this makeh is the result of Hashem's presence. This is why the Bechorim died. This is one thing that we see from that. The other thing is that the Moshe Rabbeinu told Pare about Malchus Bechoros. He made sure to tell him that Malchus Bechoros is going to be Kachatzois Halayla. When the night splits, when the night divides, in the middle of the night. This is from a Sikha from Rabbi. There's a very rich Sikha from Rabbi about this evening. But this point is the Sikha from Rabbi. What was the point of saying that this was going to be in the middle of the night? What's significant about the middle of the night? What's the difference when it happens? Then the Rebbe explains that the middle of the night represents the moment of the middle of the night is a moment when there is a revelation of Hashem's presence in the world, of a quality that is of a madrege, of a level that is not part of Hishtalshelus. It's called above Hishtalshelus. I'll explain in a moment the term. It means that Hashem's presence himself, that which is above Hishtalshelus. The term Hishtalshelus, most of you probably have already learned about it. Hishtalshelus means how the godly power descends from a higher level to a lower level. And then there is a principle, another quality, another type of godly presence, which does not take place, which does not participate in this descent. That always stays where it is. This is like in a person. In a person there are the koiches, the functional qualities of a person, capability of a human being, starting from his brain, his intellect, his emotion, and then his functioning koiches like speech, thought, speech, and deed. These are all koiches that are participating in a certain process. It starts from the brain and goes it lowers itself into the emotion. From the emotion it comes back into machshava dibur u'maisa, and then he acts. Clearly in the brain there is much greater soul power than there is in the act. But it all comes from there, and this is called Seder Hishtalshelus. But it changes down from one madrege to the next and comes down. So that every act that a person does originated in the brain, but not as an act, originated in the brain as a concept. And then it came down into the emotion and into decision-making process and so forth, and then he acted on. So from that perspective, if we look at the Seder Hishtalshelus, so to speak, a person changes from one state to another state. There's a time when he sits and learns, time when he contemplates, when he reflects on what he learns, when he makes decisions, a time when he becomes personally involved emotionally. It's a different person. There's a time when he acts. Again, it's a different person. The person changes from state to state. So that everything that is in that category, that participates in this chaining down of koiches, changes all the time. But then there's another level in the person. There's a level in the person that does not change from one state to another state. And it is true to say it's the very same person who conceptualized, who thought, who realized, who invented the idea, the same person who then developed it, the same person who felt for it, and the person who went after it and followed through and brought it into action, into fact. This is a higher part of the person that does not go down from level to level. It is the same force, the same essence of the person that carries it throughout the entire process. This part of the person, there are many levels in that too, but generally this part of the person we say is a higher part, which is higher than the koiches, higher than the functioning quality of the person. And in Tiferes, in godliness, it's called higher than Hishtalshelus. It does not participate in the creation of the world. It's something which is higher than the creation of the world. That doesn't change. You learn that there are many levels in worlds. There's Asiya, there's Yitzira, there is Bria, there's Atzilus, and within each world there are many Madrigas. All these Madrigas pertain to this aspect of godliness that's called Seder Hishtalshelus. That it changes from Madriga to Madriga. Then there is an aspect that does not change. And it's the same, not only in all Madrigas in the same world, but it's the same in all worlds. It doesn't change from one world to the other. It's exactly the same in the highest world and the lower world. This is called that inyan which is above Hishtalshelus. I'm giving you a very general outline of this. You learn Mitzvim, and many of you already learned. There are many aspects to this. But the point is, the important thing to understand that which is above Hishtalshelus is not affected by the changes, by the differences within Hishtalshelus. Just like by a person. A person can go through different changes. He can be contemplative, he can be studying and thinking deeply, and then all of a sudden he gets excited, suddenly he acts. You cannot do all of these things at the same time. They're contradictory. You can be running and contemplating a deep thought at the same time. It doesn't work. What makes it possible for a person to change from one state to the other state? It is the fact that he has a certain quality in him that is above all of these different states. So he still recognizes himself as the same person. Here, I am learning, I am davening, I am giving tzedakah, I am eating, I'm going to work. It's all the same person. Because there's a certain part of the person that is higher than all of these changes. And he sees himself in everything that he does. The same is true, he said in Onim from the Okusa, there is that which is higher than Hishtalshelus, which means it doesn't change with the changes in the world. And now we come to understand the principle of the midnight. So the Rebbe explains that midnight is that moment in the night that connects the two parts of the night. The first half of the night, the second half of the night. And the difference between these two halves is a conceptual difference. It's a principal difference. The first half of the night is going towards constantly in the direction of becoming more and more dark. Going from light into dark, further and further into darkness. The second half of the night is the opposite. It starts going towards light. More and more into light. So therefore these two parts represent two different aspects of night. Gvura and Chesed. Going further into dark and then starting going into light. Gvura and Chesed are two attributes that exist in the Hishtalshelus of the world, but they are very opposite. Gvura and Chesed are two opposite qualities. And in order to bring these two half of nights, which are two opposite qualities, and to bridge them together so that they can transfer from one to the other, you have to have an aspect, a godly aspect, that can bridge two opposites. Which godly aspect can bridge the two opposites? That aspect which is higher than the Hishtalshelus, which does not change with the change of time.
That's midnight.
That's midnight. And so midnight, this is why it says that midnight is the moment, a very significant moment. This is a time when there is what's called the Lakus that's higher than Hishtalshelus, is functioning at that moment, is revealing at that moment. And that is, it affects that the two parts of the night can bridge over from one to the other. Moshe Rabbeinu made sure to tell Pari that Makas B'chodesh is going to take place at midnight. What was the point? Pari was not a fool. You know that Pari studied and knew a lot of things. And Pari understood what that meant. What Moshe was telling him is that this is going to come from that godly presence, that godly power that reveals itself at midnight. Which means it is that which is above Hishtalshelus, above the world. It does not change with worldly changes, worldly phenomenon. So that Pari will recognize that this is the real thing. This is not just a godly power that comes through, that you can duplicate some kind of a natural way. This is the godly presence itself.
Rabbi, Pharaoh knew the Seder Hishtalshelus? Pharaoh knew the Seder Hishtalshelus?
One of the things that is explained, I don't want to go far into this, that's explained in when Pari said, Lo Yodaites Hashem. Lo Yodaites Hashem, in the previous Parsha, or 2 weeks ago. So it says that what Pari was actually saying, that Hashem means Yudke Vovke. Pari said that which is higher than Hishtalshelus doesn't exist in my book. I don't know anything like that. I know natural powers, and he knew a lot of natural powers. But something which is supernatural, above Hishtalshelus, that I don't know. And this is when Moshe finally came to tell him, this is exactly what's going to happen here. So that if, up until now, you were able to obliviate yourself and not notice and not recognize the godly presence in all the markets. You said, oh, this happened because of this natural power, this because of this natural thing. Here is going to be a market that's going to bring you face to face with the reality, with the godly reality. This is why it's going to be midnight, and it's going to be B'chodesh. B'chodesh Mitzrayim are going to die. Not anybody else. Those who are representing the power of Mitzrayim. Okay, so much for this. Now, we're coming back to understand how this reflected itself by the Yidden. What did this all mean for the Jewish people? So the Gemara says that Eden came out of Mitzrayim because of two merits, two things. In one place the Gemara says that Eden came out of Mitzrayim because of Emunah, B'schus ha'emunah. In the merit of Emunah, Nigolo, I was saying in Mitzrayim, because of Emunah, Eden came taken out of Mitzrayim. In another place the Gemara says that there was other thing. There was the Mila, because Eden, before its time, before they came out of Mitzrayim, they had to do the Korban Pesach. You know that, right? In this parsha later on, it's Korban Pesach. And in order to do Korban Pesach, you have to do Mila. You can't do Korban Pesach if you have no Mila. So Eden will mal themselves, and then they did the Korban Pesach. So because of the merit of these two things, of Mila and Pesach, This is why Eden came out of Mitzrayim. So the Rebbe explains how that these two things, the Amunah and the Milah on Pesach, are really related to each other. And it is related to that which we explained before, that Makas B'Chodesh took place because of the Gili, of the revelation of that which is higher than Ishtalshelus. The principle in this is that even though the godly presence of higher than Ishtalshelus is present all the time and present all over, that cannot be displaced. It's always present, always there. The God is always there. However, it is not begiled, it's not revealed. What we see is the world. We see the natural world. In order to reveal that, something has to occur, something has to be done here in the world in order to draw this and to reveal this. It doesn't reveal itself by itself. What reveals itself in the world is that which is instrumental in creating the world. This is part of the state of Ishtalshelus. But that which reveals a godly presence that is above world, that you need a special action from here, from below, to elicit it, to draw it and to call it forth. There has to be some action here that represents that type of connection to godliness that is above Ishtalshelus, and that way, that aspect of godliness is revealed. And this, the Rebbe explains, is on these two phenomena, the Emunah and the Milah and Pesach. So let's examine these things, because the real thing, the whole talk that I'm having is in order to understand these things, particularly Emunah. Emunah, even in Mitzrayim, had Emunah. As it says, that when Moshe Rabbeinu came to the Eden and he said to them, that I'm going to take you out of Mitzrayim, says, Vayam ein ha'om, the people believed. This was a phenomenal thing. But when they believe, look how they've been treated. They are in servitude at the lowest level. Their children are being thrown into the water, into the river, to drown. And altogether, Mitzrayim was a country that was locked up. There was no way anybody could escape from Mitzrayim. There was no such thing. And all of a sudden, Moshe says to them, I'm going to take you out of Mitzrayim. I'm going to take the whole bunch of you, the whole nation out of Mitzrayim, millions of people. This was completely beyond contemplation. You can't even imagine how that can happen. And yet, it says Eden believed. Vayam ein ha'om. And because of that emunah, this is what elicited the godly revelation and the took him out of Mitzrayim. Now, what is this emunah? How can they possibly believe this when they see all the opposite things? What does it mean they believed? This gives us an opportunity to delve into emunah a little bit and to understand the principle. What type of quality is this? The word emunah, the word I believe, we sometimes use to express a sense that we have, what's called an educated guess. We have a sense. I believe that the stock market is going to go up tomorrow. What maybe he believes.
Hypothesis?
Or
It's a hypothesis?
he has a sense how things are going. I believe the weather is going to warm up tomorrow or going to get cold. This is all on the basis of some kind of experience that a person has. I believe such and such is going to happen. This is not belief. This is a person's premonition of something that makes sense to him. Based on his experience, he says, I think this is going to happen. He doesn't have proof of it. It's not a logical thing. That's why he calls it belief. Because it's not completely logical, but it's all based on personal experience. The Amunah that Eden showed in Mitzrayim was not based on any of that. It was not based on personal experience at all. And we're talking about a couple of 100 years, 2 centuries. We're not talking about a short period of time. Now, people that remembered when we were free, we'll go back to that freedom. No, that was all beyond. There was no one left from that time. So, on what basis did they believe? What does it mean I believe? This was not on the basis of, it was not a rational thing. It was not based on any previous experience, on any rationale. What made them accept the thought that they are going to be redeemed? The answer is, and this is the important thing that we have to understand, that despite the fact that we are oriented, we see world around us, like we say Seder Hishtalsos, we see things working in the world in a certain way, and if things, according to the world in nature, are set up in a certain way, the world will maintain it, and it will go from state to state, within, so to speak, the confines and the limits of the world. Despite of all this experience, deep down we also know. Now, please understand, the Eden were in Mitzrayim for 200 years, and they were enslaved for, I know exactly, 130 of these 200 years. Really subjugated and enslaved. And nobody ever was able to interfere with that activity. Paro ruled it, and nothing ever happened outside of that natural decision of Paro. This is what I'm going to do, and it went, and it was able to carry it through, all the way to the point of throwing the babies into the river. So from all experiences, the idea of coming out of Mitzrayim had absolutely no basis. How can they even contemplate and think of freedom? That is because, despite of all their experiences, they also perceived deep down that the world does not belong to Paro. They recognize deep down that there is a godly existence. They didn't show it in any way to them. They didn't see it. But that the true existence is a godly existence which is above world. So despite the fact that it's all hidden and everything runs according to the way Paro wants to run it, they recognized deep down that that's not the truth, the ultimate truth. So when Moshe comes to them and says, God said, I'm going to redeem them. I know what you're talking about. I've never seen it, but I can relate to it because I believe that the real truth is godly, not worldly. And if God said, I'm going to take you out of Mitzrayim, I can believe it. I can believe that because that's the way I really see the world deep down. Even though in my experience I have absolutely no basis for saying it. In other words, Emunah truly represents a view and a perception, perceived perception that we have that sees way beyond world, beyond Seder Hishtalshelus, sees a truth that is not limited to worldly process. By worldly process, to come out of Mitzrayim, to become free, is impossible. But by an interference, by revealing that which is not limited to one, above Hishtalshelus, is not affected by it, in one instant he can turn around. He can turn around in one instant. Do I expect it to happen? I don't, because I see the world running the way it's running. But that it's possible, I certainly think it's possible. That's what Eden said. We believe you. In other words, we can relate to it. This emunah that Eden were able to relate to Hashem at this level which transcends world, transcends Seder Hishtalshelus, and they were able to follow through on it and say, we believe this elicited. It says, if Eden believed that I am there, so therefore that makes it possible for Hashem to reveal himself on that level. This is the one aspect. The emunah. And then came the other two things of Milah and Pesach. Milah and Pesach both represent the very similar thing, the very same thing of emunah, because Eden had to do this, what's called with Mesiras Nefesh. I'm sure you heard the word Mesiras Nefesh. In the context that we're deciding discussing now, Mesiras Nefesh means that one brings about, reveals a koyach, a part of his perception, part of his belief that is not rational, that is not part of the seder, of the normal seder of the human thought process. When he thinks in a normal, in a natural and a sequential manner, a natural sequence of events. Mesiras Nefesh means that it comes, that he relates, he reveals a certain aspect of his nefesh, that he can act in a manner that does not make sense to his rational mind. If it doesn't make sense, then he's not a rational person. No, he's a very rational person, because he perceived that which is higher than rational. He's not acting like an idiot, without thinking. He's thinking, and he recognizes, like we said before, that which is rationally understood is not the whole truth. There's a truth which is beyond that, which is not limited to the rational process. And this is why Eden were able to go and bemal themselves all of a sudden in Mitzrayim. Which means that they were able to translate this emunah from being just a concept, a belief deep down in their soul, to experiencing it on their bodies. It pertains to my physical being. And he says it's the same thing. Just the way I perceive it in my soul, my body is also part of that truth. That was Mila. And then beyond that was the next step was Pesach. Pesach translated, brought out this Amunah even further. Like this, a person says, okay, I believe. And this, I believe, I'm going to accept that belief and allow it to affect everything about me, even my physical being. But that doesn't mean that the whole world is the same thing. This is my belief. When they can go and take the Pesach, take a sheep which is part of the world, which is not them, outside of themselves. And they say, I'm going to take a sheep and I'm going to shecht it for a korban. That reveals that emunah even outside of himself, which means that he's making a statement that this emunah is not just true for me. This is not just my personal belief. This is what I believe, and I want to follow through. No, this is not just my personal belief. This is the truth of the whole world. This is the statement of Korban Pesach. And they were able to go and take the Korban Pesach and shecht it in front of the Egyptian, in front of the Mitzrayim, by whom this was Avodah Zarah. It was completely contrary. They couldn't tolerate such a thing. Moshe Rabbeinu himself said, Moshe Rabbeinu said, when Parah suggested that they do the Avodah in Mitzrayim, Moshe Rabbeinu said, that's impossible. They're going to stone us. They won't be able to tolerate it. And he even take this sheep right in front of them and shecht it. Which means that now the Eden have brought out, and they've shown that this belief has permeated, went through and through their whole thought process, the physical view, physical experience, and their view of the whole world. And this is what brought about that there should be this revelation, this godly revelation, this Atzam Holocaust, God himself revealed himself. And as a result of that, there was Makas B'choros. As a result of that, Paroi could no longer deny God's presence, because he saw that this whole phenomenon of Makas B'choros, what took place there, was an actual phenomenon of experiencing a godly presence. It wasn't a proof like you make a makkah. I prove to you through some kind of a miraculous act. And you want to accept it or you don't accept it. You can reinterpret it whichever way you want. This is something which you can't reinterpret. This is the reality itself. I'm going to tell you a little story, just to give a little a light experience of this whole talk. I may have told it to you once before, but probably all of you who are here were not here when I told you that story before. I don't remember if I told you this. This is something which happened when I was a Shir Bacher, which is not that long ago, more than 10 years ago, but so there was a man over there that used to come in, and this man was a learned man. He had a good head. He was a Shir Bacher at one time before. And came from parents. His real father was a Rav. Something failed in his life, and as a result of that, he went off. He had a ruined life. He was like a tramp. You know what a tramp is? He was traveling from place to place. He wasn't settled any place. He didn't live in a place. He didn't do anything. He was gifted, but he couldn't settle himself down. And he used to come into the yeshiva. I mean, I had all kinds of debates with him and talk to him, He said that the Rebbe promised my parents that I'm going to come back to Yiddishkeit. And I'm waiting to see when that's going to happen. Anyway, so this man one time comes into this medrash and says, Abba, I want to tell you what happened to me. I was going from this, trying to get to a certain place. And I was hitchhiking. What hitchhiking means? Hitchhiking means you stand on the highway and you point, you want to go in that direction. And somebody would stop and give you a lift. Today, you have to be crazy to pick up anybody because it's dangerous. Then also it was, people wouldn't pick up so easily. But it was much, much more common. I was hitchhiking to this place. And I'm standing there on the road and nobody stops. It was getting late, getting dark. In the dark, forget, nobody's going to pick you up in the dark. By day, they see who you are and they pick you up by day. And I was very tired. I was unhappy, tired and cold. Nobody's picking me up. So what am I going to do? So I start walking on the road. Start walking. Okay, I have no choice. I'll walk. As I'm walking, the night falls, and a drizzle, rain starts coming down. Not a heavy rain, a drizzle. I tell you, I was miserable. What does a person do when he is miserable? He starts talking to God. All of a sudden, God is a reality. I started talking to God. I'm walking. I said, God, he said, if I had $20, those days $20 was a valuable amount. If I had $20, what would I do? I would go off, I would buy me a ticket on a bus to go to the place where I want to go. Then over there, I would go into a hotel, get me a warm bath, and have a good night's sleep. And then I had some breakfast besides. And he's dreaming about this $20. What would happen if I would have had $20? He's walking under it. He says, "Oh God, show me that you can, that you know who I am, and you know where I am, and you know what I need, and you show me that you can respond. Show me, Adarabah. Prove yourself." He says, I was walking, I started believing, that this is going to happen. So I started looking on the ground, in the grass, in the bushes. Where is the $20 that Hashem is sending me? Looking here, person in that state of mind. As I'm walking, a car stops. Car stops. I'm walking up to this guy. The guy says, "Where do you want to go?" So I'm going there. He says, "Okay, I'll take you." So I go into his car and I said to him, I'm surprised he stopped. People don't stop. Don't worry, I'm not worried. I'm not scared. So I took him in. Drives him up to the town where he wants to go. Apparently it wasn't very far. Says, "Okay, this is as far as I'm going. Thank you very much." Then the man turns around and says, "Look, I see you're tired, you're cold. I want to give you a little something. Not much." Takes out a $20 bill. Gives him $20, says, "Go, book yourself a hotel room, take a bath, and have a good night's sleep." Just like that. So he said, I took this $20 bill. Huh? I took this $20 bill. I looked at it. I thought it was some kind of a dream. I didn't believe it's real. walk out of the car with this $20 bill, go in to change it, just to test is it real or not, Can you give me 2 tens for this 20, just to make sure it's real. It's real. I give him $20, they give me 2 tens. Okay. Oh yeah, wait, forgot the main part of it. As he was walking through this misery and talking to God, he was telling God, if you prove to me that you know who I am and you know where I am, I promise I am going to change my way. I'm coming back. I'm going to change my way. Coming out of this car, and the $20 is real. So I go, and I book myself a hotel room. I take a deep, long bath. And I climb into bed. And I have a good night's sleep. I come back to my senses. You know what happens when I came back to my senses? I forgot the whole thing. You know, Abba, what happens. You come back, you discount this, you discount that, and nothing happened. So, you can have all kinds of proofs. If you don't have the power of conviction, and the power of the understanding, and the strength to live up to your convictions, it doesn't happen. This is why it's necessary to have Amunah. Because in the Amunah, it's not just rational. I have proof of this, I have proof of that. Look what happened, look what happened. It's not enough. You have to have the Amunah, you have to have the perception. You have to have the sense that, yes, God's presence is always there, and it is not part of the world, and it's above world, it's not affected by world, and God is watching over everything, and the whole reality of the world is God's presence. And then, when things happen, they fall into reality. You can follow through on it. You can go and do a bris milah, you can make a korban pesach, and you can ultimately follow Moshe out of Mitzrayim into the Geulah. Without Chas Shalom, if we don't have that insight of Amunah, no matter what proofs are brought, we don't have the koyach. It's not real. There's nothing to follow. So, maybe it was helpful that we over here, we're learning Torah, we understand and we see clearly what the truth is and so forth. At the same time, we also have to remember that we are Eden, and our greatest gift that we have is this insight, this Amunah. To know absolutely what the truth is, that the truth doesn't change with time. The Torah today is just as valid as it was 3,500 years ago, because God doesn't change, and God the present doesn't change. No matter what happens in the world, even God forbid, during the Holocaust, the Jewish people knew the truth. They didn't doubt the truth. Even though there was such a destruction, such evil that completely denied godliness. He denied godliness in the world, but he did not deny God as being unaffected by the world. And that is the ultimate truth. And with this is what's going to take us out of the golus. Each individual has an individual golus, and the mitzvah, the golus from Klal Yisrael, with Mashiach.